My name is Michael. I'm 42 years old, and I've been a truck driver for more than 15 years, driving through the highways of the United States. I've always liked the feeling of being alone on the road, crossing entire states with nothing but the hum of the engine as company. But despite everything I've lived through, nothing ever marked me as much as a freezing night in rural Kansas, when something I still can't explain happened to me. To this day, just thinking about it brings back the same pressure in my chest and that shiver that ran down my spine. It was winter, early December. The wind hit the windshield as if trying to push me off the road, and snowflakes piled up along the asphalt. I was hauling a load of industrial supplies, nothing unusual, and I had to get to Denver by morning. I left Kansas City already knowing I'd be driving all night. Anyone who knows that region knows there are long stretches of road with absolutely nothing. Only fields, silos, and once in a while, an isolated service station. It's in those empty spaces that your mind starts to play tricks. At least that's what I thought. That night, in the very first hours of driving, I noticed something different. I can't explain exactly what, but the silence felt heavier. Even with the radio playing faint country music, it felt like the sound didn't fill the space inside the cab. And strangely, I hadn't seen another truck in a long time. Usually, there's always at least a few semis passing in the opposite direction, but that night it felt like I was the only one on the highway. Around 2 in the morning, already more than 100 miles from any major city, I noticed a strange shadow by the roadside. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a deer. I slowed down. Last thing I needed was to hit something that size. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't an animal. It was a person, standing still, facing the road. The headlights lit up the figure for a few seconds. It was a thin man, wearing what looked like a dark coat, but he was standing in a way that froze me, arms dropped at his sides, head slightly tilted, completely still, like a statue. What disturbed me most was his face, or rather the lack of expression. The headlights shone right on him, but he didn't react, didn't even blink. I drove past, slowly, my heart racing, and glanced at the rearview mirror to confirm he was really there. He wasn't. I stared hard, unbelieving. It was impossible. I'd just seen him, not 10 yards away. There was nowhere to hide. Only open snow-covered fields, no trees, nothing. And yet, in the mirror, the roadside was empty. A strange chill ran down my spine, different from the winter cold. It was like someone had pressed a block of ice between my shoulder blades. I pressed harder on the gas, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it, that maybe it was a trick of the light, a fallen branch, something. But deep down, I knew it wasn't my imagination. I kept driving, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. My eyes kept darting to the mirror, even when I tried not to look. Nothing but the darkness behind me, lit only by the red glow of my taillights. That's when I heard the first strange sound, a sharp thud, like something had hit the side of the trailer. I instinctively checked the side mirrors, trying to see what it could have been. The road was completely empty. No cars behind, no animals. The shoulder stretched flat and white. Still, I swore I'd heard an impact. I pressed harder on the gas. I was already over the speed limit, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get out of that stretch. Then I noticed something else. The radio started to crackle. It was as if the station had gone dead. I tried turning the dial, but all I got was static, mixed with faint, broken fragments of voices, like conversations cut short. The isolation that had already been uncomfortable became suffocating. I was alone, on an empty road, surrounded by snowfields. And suddenly, it felt like I had no connection to anything, not the radio, not the world. And then something even more disturbing happened. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw a silhouette inside the cab with me. I turned my head quickly, but there was nothing, just the empty passenger seat. Still, my heart nearly leapt out of my chest. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "You're just tired," I thought. "You've been driving for hours. Your mind's playing tricks." But when I looked again at the passenger seat, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. The seatbelt was pulled tight, as if someone was sitting in it. My stomach twisted. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, too afraid to look directly. The truck kept rolling forward, and I tried to convince myself it was just the vibration, the suspension, something mechanical. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Suddenly, the radio, which had been hissing, came alive for a few seconds. But it wasn't music, wasn't a broadcast. It was a man's voice, hoarse, saying only one sentence: "You shouldn't be here." The voice vanished instantly, and the static returned. I nearly slammed the brakes in the middle of the highway, but instead I floored the gas. The needle climbed past 60, 70, then 80. My hands shook on the wheel, every muscle locked tight. I glanced again at the passenger seat. The belt was loose, dangling as if nothing had ever happened. At that moment, I thought about pulling over, shutting the engine off and waiting for sunrise. But the idea of stopping in the middle of that nothing felt even worse. So I kept going, heart pounding in my chest, praying to see a gas station or a town soon. But the night wasn't done with me yet. With every mile I drove, I felt farther away from anywhere familiar, as if the road itself had stretched beyond normal. The GPS kept marking the same distance to the next stop, like I wasn't moving at all. I stared at the clock on the dash, and the minutes seemed to crawl, dragging on and on, feeding my anxiety. The silence, broken only by the engine and the whistle of the wind against the trailer, pressed down on me like lead. I breathed deep, trying to calm myself, but cold sweat ran down my neck despite the heater blasting. Every shadow by the roadside looked alive. Every distant tree seemed to be watching. And the image of that man standing motionless on the shoulder wouldn't leave my mind. That's when I saw the lights. Far ahead, two fluorescent beams blinking like hazard flashes from a maintenance vehicle. Relief rushed through me. Finally, someone else on the road. As I got closer, I realized it looked like a car pulled over, hazard lights on. I slowed down, ready to offer help. Truckers always look out for each other. But as I neared, I saw the car was empty. An old sedan covered in a thin sheet of snow, parked with the doors shut. No engine running, no tracks in the snow, no footprints around it. The lights blinked in steady rhythm, but there was no sign of life. I rolled past slowly, peering inside. The seats were dark, but I swore I saw something in the back seat, a shape crouched low. I looked forward immediately, refusing to glance again. I pressed the pedal, wanting distance between me and that car, but my stomach dropped when I checked the mirror. The hazard lights were off. The car looked dead, lifeless, as if it had never been flashing at all. That's when my hands started shaking uncontrollably. I kept muttering to myself, trying to push down the panic. And then, from inside the cab, I heard a sound. A faint scrape, metallic, like fingernails dragging along the inside of the passenger door. I turned my head slowly. The door was shut, the glass fogged from the cold. But there was a fresh line scratched across it, from top to bottom, as if drawn by something unseen. My eyes dropped lower, and I froze. On the passenger floor mat were boot prints, wet prints, pressed into the rubber, melting snow dripping off them. I nearly lost my breath. I had left Kansas City alone. Nobody had gotten into my truck. Nobody could have left those prints. And yet, they were right there. I snapped the radio off, desperate for silence. No more static, no more voices. The cab felt heavier without the sound, but I couldn't bear to hear it again. I just kept my eyes locked on the road, headlights carving a narrow tunnel through the black. 20 minutes later, I spotted a sign, "Rest stop ahead, a few miles." Relief washed over me. I pushed harder, anxious for light, for people, for anything that would break the isolation. But when I pulled into the rest stop, everything was dark. The neon sign, usually glowing all night, was dead. The pumps were covered in snow, untouched. The diner was closed, windows black, doors shut. I rolled in, slow, headlights sweeping across the empty lot. No cars, no trucks, no people, only the wind whistling through the metal posts. I didn't shut off the engine. Couldn't. I kept the truck running, headlights pointed forward, and just sat there a moment trying to decide. And that's when I saw it. In one of the diner windows, a silhouette. Someone standing still, just like the man on the road. A dark figure, no features, just there, watching. My chest locked tight. I slammed the gear and pulled out, tires skidding on snow, engine howling as I fled. I didn't look back, but in the mirror, just before the lot vanished, I saw every light in the rest stop flare on at once. The sign glowing, the diner lit, the pumps shining, as if everything had been perfectly normal. I didn't go back. I couldn't. I just drove, heart pounding, certain now that whatever this was, it wasn't just exhaustion. The highway stretched on, but it never seemed to change. Same fences, same snowfields, same thin stands of trees. The GPS insisted I was on the right track, but the road felt like a loop. And then I saw the car again, the same old sedan, same layer of snow, same blinking hazards. My throat tightened. It was impossible. I'd already passed that car an hour ago. But there it was, identical in every detail. I slowed as I passed, trying not to look, but I couldn't help glancing. This time the shadow in the back seat wasn't crouched. It was upright, sitting tall, watching me. I stomped the accelerator, panic rising. The truck roared, and still the highway seemed to stretch forever. A nightmare that wouldn't let me wake. At this point, I wasn't sure if I was losing my mind, but then something happened that erased all doubt. The passenger seat sank under sudden weight. No sound, just the shift of the suspension, the creak of the cushion, as if someone had sat down beside me. I froze, eyes locked on the road. My lungs burned. I couldn't breathe right. The smell in the cab changed. Damp earth, rust, wet iron. I couldn't ignore it. Slowly, against every instinct, I turned my head. There was a man sitting next to me. Pale skin, dark clothes, hollow eyes, fixed on mine. I screamed and yanked the wheel, the truck skidding sideways. The tires screamed against the ice, the trailer swayed, but by some miracle I steadied it. I looked again. The seat was empty. I trembled so violently I could barely keep my hands on the wheel. After that moment, I couldn't tell anymore what was real and what was just my mind breaking under the weight of the night. My palms were slick with sweat, the steering wheel slippery beneath them, and my breathing came in short, ragged bursts, like I'd just run for miles. But I couldn't stop. The thought of pulling over, of killing the engine, and sitting in silence felt more dangerous than anything waiting for me on the road ahead. I glanced at the dash again. The fuel gauge barely moved, almost half a tank, though I'd been driving for hours. The clock hands stuttered, sometimes racing, sometimes pausing, refusing to measure time properly. Every part of me screamed that the rules I trusted, fuel, time, distance, meant nothing out here anymore. I tried to blame fatigue. Tried to tell myself I'd fallen into some kind of waking dream, drifting on the edge of sleep. But every sensation in my body, the cold sweat, the ache in my shoulders, the raw sting of air in my throat, was too real to dismiss. That's when I heard footsteps, not outside, inside. Slow, muffled, like boots on the narrow strip of floor behind my seat. I froze, blood draining from my face. Then came a whisper, so soft I almost thought it was inside my head. Words I couldn't make out, drifting from the sleeper cab behind me. I snatched up the old CB radio, clutching it like a lifeline. I pressed the button, voice trembling. "Anyone on this line? This is Mike, rolling on I-70. Anyone copy?" At first, just static, then a sharp crackle, followed by the sound of breathing, heavy, deliberate, filling the channel. "Hello? Who's there?" My voice broke. The breathing stopped, and then came laughter. Short, low, rasping laughter that made my skin crawl. I dropped the mic as if it burned me. It landed on the passenger seat with a dull thud. But the laughter didn't fade. It lingered, echoing faintly as if it were inside the cab itself. The headlights flickered. For a split second, the road vanished, swallowed in total blackness. My stomach dropped, and when the beams flared back to life, the windshield was covered in handprints on the inside. Large, smeared handprints pressed across the glass, dozens of them. My chest seized. I grabbed the rag I kept on the dash, scrubbing frantically, but the prints didn't fade. They weren't smudges, they were stains, as if burned into the glass itself. I wanted to scream. Instead, I gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned bone white and forced myself forward, mile after mile, trapped in my own rig. Every shadow by the roadside leaned toward me. Every curve of the white line looked alive, slithering under the headlights. And then finally, far ahead, lights. Two bright beams rushing toward me. Relief broke through my panic. Another trucker. Finally, someone. I held steady, waiting for the pass. But as the lights neared, I realized they were wrong. They didn't sway, didn't bounce with the road. They came straight, rigid, fixed on me like eyes. The beams blazed as they drew alongside, and when they passed, there was nothing. No cab, no trailer, no engine, just two orbs of light vanishing into the night. No sound of tires, no rush of displaced air, just emptiness. The road stretched on again, barren. I swallowed hard, throat tight. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw movement in the corner of the rearview mirror, a figure seated on the bunk behind me, a shadow, still, watching. I spun around, desperate, but the bunk was empty. My heart slammed against my ribs, and in that moment the truck skidded. The tires bit into snow, the trailer tugged at me, and I nearly lost the lane. Somehow, I righted it. Hold it together, Michael. Just hold it together. My voice cracked like a prayer, but the highway wouldn't end. The GPS screen glitched, the arrow spinning aimlessly. The map blanked out, nothing but a black line stretching through a white void. No towns, no markers, no exits. The engine's hum shifted, coughing like it was under strain. Gauges bounced wildly. Oil pressure, temperature, fuel, all flickering nonsense. I thought about pulling over. Thought about ending this nightmare by killing the ignition. But before I could decide, the headlights lit up something ahead. A man. The same man I'd seen at the very start. Standing still on the shoulder, head tilted. Only this time he wasn't alone. Behind him stretched a line of identical figures, dozens, all lined up across the snowy field, motionless, waiting. I screamed, pressing the pedal to the floor. The truck barreled forward, my eyes fixed on the lane, refusing to look directly. But I felt it. I knew they all turned their heads as one, following me with their hollow stares. I couldn't resist glancing in the mirror. The highway behind me was empty. My throat burned. I realized I was sobbing, hot tears cutting through the cold sweat on my face. I hadn't cried from fear since I was a kid, but there was no stopping it. And in the pit of my stomach, I knew the night wasn't over. By then, I wasn't sure if I was driving by choice or if something else had taken hold of the wheel. My fingers were locked so tight around it that my joints ached, skin slick with sweat despite the freezing cab. My whole body shook, but I couldn't stop moving forward. It felt less like I was guiding the truck and more like it was pulling me, dragging me deeper into a place I didn't belong. I searched for logic. I begged myself to believe I'd nodded off, trapped in some extended hallucination. But every shiver, every drop of sweat down my back, every raw breath in my chest told me I was wide awake. And the world around me had changed into something else entirely. I looked at the dash again, desperate for something to ground me. The fuel gauge hadn't budged. The engine temperature needle bounced erratically. Nothing made sense. I tried to focus only on the painted white line ahead, like a lifeline guiding me through the void. And then the radio clicked on by itself. Static filled the cab first, then a drawn-out, broken voice. It dragged my name out in a rasp. Michael! Michael! My heart slammed against my ribs. I clenched my teeth, praying it was just bleed from some distant signal. But the voice grew louder, closer, as if it weren't coming from the speakers at all, but straight into my ear. Then it whispered, firm, undeniable, "You've already been here." I froze, because I had. The same stretch of fencing, the same slight bend to the left. I had passed it all before. I wasn't moving forward. I was trapped in a loop. My eyes burned as I scanned the horizon and saw it again, a road sign glowing in my headlights. Relief twisted instantly into dread as the words came into focus. Denver, 120 miles. I'd seen that sign before, more than once. I stomped on the gas, the truck roaring, desperate to break free. But the more speed I pushed, the more the road repeated. Same fields, same snowdrifts. And then, like a cruel joke, the old sedan appeared on the shoulder again. Same snow crust, same blinking hazards. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. As I passed, the shadow in the back seat was upright now, no longer hiding, sitting there, facing me, watching. I jammed the accelerator harder, the truck trembling, my pulse hammering in my temples. The loop tightened around me, and panic dug in its claws. Then came the weight. The passenger seat sagged under an invisible burden. No sound, no warning, just the shift of the cushion, the creak of the frame. Something was sitting next to me again. The air soured instantly. A rank stench of damp earth and rust filled my nose, making me gag. I clenched the wheel, every nerve screaming not to look. But the longer I resisted, the more unbearable it became. Slowly, against my will, I turned. A man sat there, the same pale figure from before, only now his face had changed. He was smiling, a crooked, twisted smile that made my stomach lurch. I screamed, yanking the wheel so hard the truck fishtailed across the icy asphalt. The trailer groaned, swinging wide, and for a moment I thought I'd flip. Somehow, by sheer instinct, I pulled it straight again. When I glanced back, the seat was empty. My breath came in shuddering bursts, but before I could calm down, the world outside shifted again. The highway was gone. No exit signs, no fences, no trees, just a thin strip of asphalt cutting through endless white. No features, no landmarks. The GPS showed a single dot, frozen, unmoving, as if I hadn't traveled at all. The clock on the dash had stopped completely. The silence pressed in, unnatural. Even the hum of the engine felt swallowed, muted, as if I was driving through a vacuum. And then, in the rear view, I saw them. Figures, a line of them stretching behind the trailer, walking in perfect rhythm down the road. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all identical to the man I'd seen at the start. Thin, still, head tilted. I couldn't stop. If I stopped, they'd reach me. So I floored the pedal, though I knew by now the speed didn't matter. The landscape never changed. I drove through a fog of tears and sweat, body trembling, until the road itself betrayed me. Ahead, it ended. The asphalt just stopped, dropping off into a blank horizon. A wall of nothing. I slammed the brakes, but the pedal was rigid. Dead. The wheels spun loosely in my hands, useless. The truck carried me forward into the void. Darkness swallowed the world. Shapes appeared on either side, growing from the white. 2, 4, dozens. The same figures lined the invisible shoulders, stretching endlessly. They didn't move, didn't breathe, but I felt them, watching. And then all at once they turned their heads, every single one of them. The sound of their breath filled the cab, though the windows were sealed tight. A thunderous exhalation in perfect unison. One figure stepped out, larger than the rest. It stood in the center of the road, blocking my path. The truck barreled toward it, unstoppable. I clenched my eyes shut, bracing for the collision. There was no impact. When I opened my eyes, the road was back. White lines, snowbanks, horizon. The gauges sat steady on the dash. Everything looked normal. But my body told me otherwise. My hands were locked, my shirt plastered to me with sweat, my heartbeat still pounding in my throat. The mirror showed nothing but empty road. For a moment I almost let myself believe it was over, that I'd somehow slipped free. But then, clear as thought, without sound, without voice, the words came back to me. "You're still here." When the road returned to normal, for a few minutes, I let myself believe it was over. Snow drifted softly across the shoulders, the white line stretched ahead in calm rhythm, and the steady hum of the engine almost sounded reassuring again. My breathing steadied, shaky but deeper, and I clung to that fragile sense of normal like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. But deep down, I knew it wasn't finished. The words echoing in my head weren't random. I was still inside whatever this was. I drove on, refusing to glance at the mirrors, refusing to touch the radio. I wanted no more voices, no more tricks. Just the road, just forward. Then I saw the sign again. Denver, 120 miles. My stomach turned. I'd seen it too many times to count. The road was holding me hostage, spinning me through the same nightmare loop. I slammed my fist against the dash. "Let me out!" The truck groaned in response, a metallic snap echoing from the engine, though nothing failed. It was as if it mocked me. Memories clawed at me then. Years back, at a truck stop in Colorado, I'd overheard two older drivers talking. They whispered about a cursed stretch of I-70, about men who disappeared, others who went mad, some who swore they drove for days without moving forward. I had laughed at the time, shaking my head at ghost stories told over black coffee. But now, on this night, I wasn't laughing. A voice filled the cab again, deep, final. "You shouldn't have entered." I whipped my head around, but no one was there. The sound hadn't come from the radio, hadn't come from outside. It was the air itself speaking. The cold inside the cab dropped further, burning my lungs as I breathed, and once more the passenger seatbelt was drawn tight. I begged myself not to look. I knew what I'd see. But slowly, as if dragged by invisible strings, my head turned. He was there again, the pale man dressed in black. Only this time, his face bore an expression, a crooked grin, twisted, almost human but not quite. I shouted, jerking the wheel, the truck lurching across the snow-slick pavement. The trailer screamed, threatening to topple, but somehow I pulled it back in line. When I dared to glance again, the seat was empty. The road around me shifted once more. No more fences, no more trees, just a naked strip of asphalt threading through an endless white expanse. The GPS showed a single frozen dot. The clock on the dash no longer ticked. Silence pressed down, heavier than before. Even the engine seemed muted, and then, in the mirror, I saw them again. An army of figures, stretching down the road behind me, walking in step. Identical faces, tilted heads, dozens upon dozens. I couldn't stop. Stopping meant they'd reach me, so I pressed the pedal, though I knew speed meant nothing. The landscape never changed. Hours or seconds, I couldn't tell, slipped past. My hands numbed on the wheel, my eyes raw from forcing them open, and then the road ended again. Ahead, the asphalt dissolved into nothing, a sheer horizon of white, no continuation. I fought the brake pedal, but it was solid stone. The wheel spun limp in my grip. The truck carried me forward, unstoppable. At the brink, I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the plunge, for the crash. Nothing came. When I opened them, I was parked at a brightly lit truck stop. Neon signs buzzed overhead. Cars filled the lot. The words on the sign read, "Welcome to Denver." The truck was shut off. My hands still clutched the wheel, knuckles aching, but the engine was silent. The clock read 7 in the morning. Sunlight spilled faintly over the horizon. People walked around casually, fueling up, buying coffee. I stumbled out of the cab, legs weak, lungs pulling at the sharp morning air. No one looked at me twice. To them, I was just another tired driver rolling in after a long haul. But when I circled the trailer, my blood froze. Handprints, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, imprinted into the dirt and melted snow, streaking the metal sides. Palms, pressed flat, as if countless hands had clung to the truck all night long. No one else noticed, no one else saw. Since that morning, I've never driven that stretch alone again. And whenever I pass through Kansas, I still feel eyes on me from the shoulder of the road. Because deep down, I know I never escaped. I was only allowed to leave. And sometimes, when I'm alone at the wheel in the dead of night, I still hear the whisper crawling up from the silence. You're still here.